Greetings, brethren, and welcome to this Sabbath service for the third day of May 2014, the third day of the second month, Ziph, on God's holy, sacred calendar. Today, in the service and this broadcast that we'll have by Mr. Armstrong that I'll play here after some up-to-the-minute news related to a disease epidemic. I'm going to repeat a short clip by God's end-time apostle and most faithful servant, Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong, in which he shares the understanding that God gave him to give to us regarding the end-time Elijah to come, who came, and as you'll hear in an article I'll be reading a portion of today, that end-time Elijah may come again in an inspired or miraculous way. First, though, friends, let's sing a hymn together. And then I'll briefly cover an extremely important and significant news story that broke just this week, and a follow-up to it that just broke last night. Then we'll hear Mr. Armstrong and then part 2 of the animated movie short on the original Elijah. You know, I played part 1 last week, so if you missed that, it's in the archive for last week. Then at the end of today's service, we'll sing another hymn, and I'll conclude with an editorial or evaluation, Spokesman's Club style, you might say, of an article that was recently published that is asserting that Vladimir Putin is probably the Prince of Rosh in Ezekiel 38, and that God has a message for Putin via the author of the article. I'm not saying that's what's happening, friends. I'm just saying that's what an article. We're going to read a short article. We're going to read to you, and the evaluation of that article that I'll share with you is a good one, written by a 1967 alumnus of Ambassador College in Bricket Wood, in which he clarifies the truth of what we were taught correctly about Russia attacking America or not. You'll hear that brief evaluation or report coming up a little later during today's service, which will smooth out the flurry of strange noises being blasted with uncertainty from, shall we say, an unsound trumpet. That's not to say that some who blast out those uncertain sounds don't hit a few resonant notes once in a while that ring right on tune. But that's the problem with trying to do a work from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The tree mixes enough good to make the evil have the wrong, to make the evil sound right, as a line goes in David Soul's "Don't Give Up on Us, Baby." Maybe we'll play that tune, that song, at the end of today's service, and hope that it won't throw us into a content ID problem with YouTube that will block out the audio. We'll see. For now, let's first have a hymn, and then we'll go to Mr. Armstrong for a 3-minute clip. I'll be back to introduce that. And let's sing this song together, friends. First, Psalm 23. Page 115B, if you're using a purple book, it's page 39. It got carried into the blue book also. Again, from Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd." Let's all sing this together from our heart. This is one we should be able to sing well. The Lord is my shepherd. Pastures green he leadeth me. within the paths of righteousness, even for his own name's sake. Yea, though I walk in death's dark vale, yet will I fear none ill, for thou art with me, and thy rod and staff me comfort still. My table thou hast furnished in presence of my foes. My head thou dost with oil anoint, and my cup overflows. Goodness and mercy all my life shall surely follow me, and in God's house forevermore my dwelling place shall be. Okay, brethren, thank you for joining along on that psalm with us there. Appreciate that, those of you who did. And let's cue it up. Let's waste no time. Let's go right into that 3-minute clip with Mr. Armstrong speaking about the end time Elijah.
Now, another prophecy I would like to read you in Malachi, the 4th chapter of the book of Malachi, beginning with verse 5. Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and the dreadful day of the Lord. It's talking about the day of the Lord, and before that time, someone will come. Elijah the prophet lived a long time ago. He is gone and dead. But someone will come in the power and the spirit of Elijah. John the Baptist came in the power and spirit of Elijah, but he was not Elijah, preparing the way for Jesus Christ at his first coming. He was a voice crying out in the physical wilderness of the Jordan River, and preparing the way for the physical Jesus, born of the human Virgin Mary and laid in a manger because there was no room in the hotel, coming in his humility and coming to his physical people, Judah, and to the physical temple at Jerusalem at that time, built of stone and wood and precious stones. But now a voice is to cry out before the second coming of Christ, coming in power and glory as the King of kings and the Lord of lords, to rule the earth and to replace Satan and displace Satan until he will not be here to deceive the world any longer, and to put an end to this trouble and this slaughter and this great tribulation that is coming upon this world. And some voice has got to come in the spiritual wilderness of modern Babylon or confusion and call the people out of this Babylon, as you read in the 18th chapter of the book of Revelation. Come out of her, my people, and prepare the way for the spiritual Christ to come in power and glory as the King of kings and the Lord of lords, and to come to his spiritual temple, the church that will rise and meet him in the air, changed from mortal to immortal, their faces shining as the very sun, their eyes as flames of fire. I tell you, my people, we're coming to that time, and it's time for a voice to cry out and to tell the people that we're coming into that time, and to say, come out of this Babylon of religious confusion of our day and believe the Word of God. Because there are many that are preaching something altogether different today.
How true. Hey, thank you very much, Mr. Armstrong, for those few minutes of statements on the end time Elijah. And friends, before we go to the article I told you about, written by a 1967 alumnus of Ambassador College in Bricket Wood, we're going to have that animated part 2 of the original Elijah that we'll play here for you first. But before that, I going to go through that news article I told you about. On Wednesday this week, Nightcast.tv, night-cast.tv, reported, that's the website address, night-cast.tv. Some of you watch that are here today. If you don't know about it, if you haven't been watching that, we do a half-hour program Sunday through Thursday night each week, covering the current day's world news related to the Bible and prophecy. And this story that broke on Wednesday reported a news story from that day that told of how 7 different bacteria responsible for common serious diseases such as pneumonia, diarrhea, and blood infections and other things are developing resistance to antibiotics used to treat the bacteria, and they're no longer working in more than half of the people treated. You know, some of us know there's a better way. God speaks about none of these diseases. You'll get none of these diseases if you simply obey. But, you know, God hasn't called everyone to either have the faith for that or to even understand it in some cases. And so the world has a way of treating disease. They've been using antibiotics, and it worked for a long time. But after a time, as you'll hear in this news story, I'll cover it in a moment, there's just a natural mutation that occurs. Antibiotics build up the diseases build up a normal mutation toward being eradicated by antibiotics. In fact, here I've got the paragraph right in front of me. It's considered normal in the medical world that bacteria will naturally mutate to eventually become immune to antibiotics. But what's happening today, because of what the World Health Organization calls the misuse of these antibiotic drugs, because the organization says that doctors are overprescribing them on the one hand, and then on the other hand, patients are failing to finish courses, with the result being that resistance to antibiotics is, it means it's happening that at what's now an alarming rate, mutation is occurring much faster than expected, such that antibiotic resistance is now a global threat. The WHO, the World Health Organization, warned on the 30th of April, Wednesday of this week. Now, on that same day, an article by Pippa Stevens, the health reporter for the BBC News, in the picture caption she had with her news story, it said, WHO, World Health Organization, called for more preventative measures against infection. And then I'm going to read her article to you before we give you the current, the most recent news story on this. Resistance to antibiotics poses major global threat to public health, says a new report by World Health Organization, WHO, who it analyzed data from 114 countries and said resistance was happening now in every region of the world. And friends, before I read the rest of this article to you, while some of you may be starting to tune out or something because, hey, reading an old boring news story, this should not be boring to you at all. Let's put our chart up on the screen for a moment, a chart that we used during the news program. You look at the fourth one over, the fourth column over, where it says number 4, and it says pale, and there's a pale green color there, and then below that it says plagues, and then below that it says loimus, seismus, and terike. Now those are the 3 Greek words that Jesus Christ used to describe the characteristics of this fourth seal. And we're going to focus in on that first one that he mentioned, the loimos. But first, let's explain. This fourth seal is described in Revelation as a pale horse with a rider named Death, alongside whom rides Hades, or hell, or the grave, in other words. And a prophecy tells us that 1/3 of the whole world is going to die from the characteristics of this seal, primarily from the loimos, the disease epidemics. And so, with that prophecy in mind, that 1/3 of the world will be killed from disease epidemics, this story should make those of us who have hair, it should make our hair stand on end, you know. It should tell us, hey, we're getting close, because let's just put that chart back up here once again. Let's see, do I have a larger version of that? I think I do. Let me bring up a bigger version of this chart. See if this is the correct version of it. Well, okay, you can see the colors and the words better in this chart. Number 4 is the pale horse. That's the fourth seal of Revelation. You notice the very next seal is number 5, the Great Tribulation. Now, before the Great Tribulation comes, these first 4 seals will increase in their activity. And of course, this chart is showing the first 6 of 7 seals. Once all 6 of these seals happens, the 7th seal, the day of the Lord, I'll put the wider version of this chart on the screen in just a moment. But let me back up and just say, right now we're at the point between the 4th and the 5th seal. The next major event to occur in prophecy is the 5th seal, the Great Tribulation, the martyrdom of saints, a time of World War III, a time when the Holy Roman Empire will be revived. And by a Holy Roman Empire, it means that there's a church of this world that will be ruling over that empire, be ruling over it in the sense that it influences that empire, and whomever that church, that big Catholic church, Catholic meaning universal or worldwide. I didn't want to use the word worldwide, but Catholic also means worldwide. A big global church whoever that church announces as anathema to God, and those who it's most likely to announce as anathema are those who refuse to take the mark of the beast. In other words, those who refuse to work on the Sabbath and refuse to bow down to the image, the religion of that beast. And that beast adopts the Catholic, Roman Catholic religion. The beast will be an emperor, as the past beasts have been, and most likely coronated by the Pope, who will put the crown on the head of the emperor in the same place where he has done this for the past heads of this beastly empire. That will be in Frankfurt, Germany. Even though that hall where the past emperors were coronated by the Pope was destroyed during World War II by bombers, aircraft bombers, dropping bombs from their planes. The United States provided money through the Marshall Plan to help and did in fact rebuild that hall as a memorial hall now, which houses portraits of all the past emperors of the Roman Empire, holy and otherwise. Big old hall, and so it's right there, made ready again now for the 7th head to come in and revive this empire. And again, the Pope will hold the coronation ceremonies, will crown that new emperor. That's part of the 5th seal. Then World War III will be kicked off, martyrdom of the saints, of those who refuse to bow down and worship the beast and who refuse to work upon the Sabbath. In other words, those who refuse to take the mark of the beast. They'll be condemned, marked as anathema by the Pope, and the beast will then have those people killed, probably tortured, burned at the stake, or have their heads cut off on a guillotine, or killed in some hideous way. But those who remain behind as remnants of God's church and go through that are promised white robes. They're promised to be able to sup with Christ, to be at the marriage supper, along with the rest of us who may still be alive at Christ's return. But those who are martyred at this time, they do have an honor. When Christ returns, those who are martyred, they come up first in the resurrection. And then those of us who remain alive, who are in a place of protection, we go up after those who were martyred. So they have a very special relationship. But that fourth seal that I was just showing you, brethren and friends, is a seal which Jesus Christ described in plain language has a characteristic of loimos, disease epidemics. And this disease that was announced in Wednesday's news. Now, I haven't even got to last night's news for you on this yet, but I want to just rehearse the rest of Wednesday's news on this and then give you last night's news. Wednesday's news described a post-antibiotic era, a post-antibiotic era where people die from simple infections that have been treatable for decades, but not anymore. It's the antibiotics that used to take care of the diseases don't work on half the people today. Today, in this what's being called an antibiotic era, the post-antibiotic era, because during the antibiotic era, the antibiotics worked. But now we're in the post-antibiotic era where antibiotics are not working like they used to. The report that the news report's telling us about goes on with a quote that says, there were likely to be, quote, devastating implications unless significant action was taken urgently, the report added. Now, this report focused on seven different bacteria responsible for common serious diseases such as pneumonia, diarrhea, and blood infections. The report suggested 2 antibiotics no longer work in more than half of the people being treated in some countries. Now, I've got the other story for you from last night. This report the news report by Donald G. McNeil, Jr. And the headline for this, MERS virus, MERS virus, is found in Indiana man who visited Mid-East. Again, this article, I'll be reading this to you, friends, from last night, this article from yesterday, from late last night, an article by Donald G. McNeil. Well, let me just take a sip of water real quick. Okay, thank you, and maybe I can get through this main story article here. We'll just read a little bit of it. A virus that has killed more than 100 people in the Middle East has been found in the United States for the first time in an Indiana healthcare worker who recently returned from Saudi Arabia, according to federal health officials yesterday. The man whose name, now this is the federal health officials reported this yesterday. The man probably returned a few days before that. The man whose name, age, and exact occupation have not been released is in stable condition in an Indiana hospital, said Dr. Ann Schuchat, Director of Respiratory Diseases at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. He is in isolation and receiving oxygen. A single American case of the virus called MERS, M-E-R-S, it stands for Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, M-E-R-S, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, is a very low risk, Dr. Schuchat said. The CDC, do you believe her? We'll find out. The CDC is not recommending that anyone change travel plans to the Middle East, but a team from the agency will travel to Indiana to assist in treatment and to retrace the patient's contacts. He flew to Chicago from Saudi Arabia, a city in Saudi Arabia, via London, by way of London, on April 24. So just about a week ago, a little more than a week ago. Then he took a bus to Indiana. He fell ill on April 27 and was hospitalized the next day. But because bus companies often don't show who bought tickets or who sat where, that bus ride may be a challenge, said Tom Skinner, a CDC spokesman. MERS, M-E-R-S, is a coronavirus similar to SARS, S-A-R-S, or severe acute respiratory syndrome, which killed hundreds of people, mainly in China, in 2002 and 2003. The newer virus was first reported in 2012 in Saudi Arabia. Since then, about 400 cases have been reported to the World Health Organization. About a third have been fatal. The numbers are inexact because of delays in laboratory confirmations. Friends, I'm still reading from this article. There's just a little bit more of it. The virus is thought to have originated in bats, but it's also widespread in camels. So be sure to stay away. Be sure to keep your camel tied up way away from you in your backyard back there. No, it's camels in the Middle East. Back to the article. While it's not spread easily between humans, there have been outbreaks within families and in hospitals where patients have infected paramedics, nurses, and doctors. For unknown reasons, cases began surging in Saudi Arabia in March this year. Some experts fear, for some reason they began spreading this year, friends. Take note of that. Some experts fear that mutations made the virus more transmissible. You notice that word mutations made the virus more transmissible. The other article we read from Wednesday's news reports talking about we're now in this post-antibiotic era. Suddenly, mysteriously, they've got their explanation as to why, but friends, there's probably another explanation to why when you read between the pages of this book and when you look at the prophecies that are to come. God has prophesied that 1/3 of the people of this world will die, be killed by disease epidemics in the end time. And so suddenly antibiotics, which used to treat diseases, aren't working in half the people anymore because of mutation. And so now this story is using the same principle or point. It's saying for unknown reasons, unknown reasons. Here's the reason, friends. let's put this chart back up on the screen. Just count over 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Fourth column. You see it says pale there. That stands for the fourth seal, the pale horse, depicted in Revelation as, in chapter 6 of Revelation, as having a rider whose name is Death, alongside whom Hades, hell, the grave rides. And a characteristic of this horse, as described in plain language by Jesus Christ, is loimus, disease, epidemics, pestilence, the plagues of Egypt. And this story is saying, well, they don't know about this. See, they don't understand that this seal was opened up during the lifetime of Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong, and given for the wise to understand. But the world says it this way. Back to the news report. For unknown reasons, cases began surging in Saudi Arabia in March this year. Some experts fear that mutations made the virus more transmissible, while others believe that more camels are transmitting it. Serious story, but I'm sorry, certain parts of the story make me want to just howl in laughter, side-splitting laughter. Others believe that more, this could be carried by camels, but, God's causing this to be worked out some way. Others believe that camels are transmitting it and that carelessness in the hospitals has helped it spread. That may well be true. Too. Back to the article, the classic symptoms are fever and shortness of breath. Fever and shortness of breath, which, Steve, I need to behave myself here, folks, today. It's Sabbath. It's a time to be refreshed and a time to rejoice, friends. So if I'm acting a little bit goofy today, I just have to ask you to forgive me. I try to keep it very professional Sunday through Thursday nights during the program. I do get a little angry or excited sometimes when I see certain stories. But today's a day to rejoice, be refreshed. But the rest of this story, the couple of characteristics or symptoms of this disease is shortness of breath and fever, which indicates pneumonia, but there have been mild cases and unusual symptoms. The WHO, the World Health Organization, suggests that hospitals test any patient who has returned from the Middle East within 14 days. There have been large recent outbreaks in Saudi Arabia and in Abu Dhabi and in the United Arab Emirates. And the first case in Egypt was just reported. There is no cure. I'm quoting from the report from last night, friends. Let me repeat it, that part. There is no cure. Patients may be put on ventilators and given antibiotics to prevent secondary bacterial infections in the hope that their immune system will slowly defeat the virus. Scientists going through libraries of antibiotics, which can prevent a virus from invading new cells, have found two that attach to MERS, M-E-R-S. But antibody treatments take time to produce, and so far there is no vaccine. Travelers to the Middle East have been warned to stay away from farm animals and camels in particular. Camels are raised for meat and milk, for racing, and to haul goods. So-called beauty camels are kept as pets and are entered into beauty contests. Experts suspect that raw camel milk and meat transmit the virus. Now, friends, that makes me, we should check our Bibles for, let's see, where is it? I haven't had to look at this in a long time. I know one of them is Leviticus 11. I think the other one may be Deuteronomy 14. Let's just take a quick look there, and I think it'll tell us one thing that we should be. Most of you know this already, but I just want to read it to you. I'm pretty sure camel's going to come up in the part that says, of all the meat which may be eaten, let's see. These, verse 31 of Leviticus 23, these are unclean to you among all that creep. And verse 32, and whosoever any of them which are dead doth fall. Let me back up. These also shall be unclean among you, the weasel and the tortoise, and the ferret, and the chamalon, and the lizard, and the snail, and the mole. And let's see. Let's go back. Is camel clean to eat? I don't think so. Backing up, verse 24. And for these shall be unclean. The carcasses of every beast which divides the hoof and is not cloven-footed, and so on. I think the camel is among that. I thought it told us for certain. Oh, here, there's more. Wait a minute. Backing up to verse 12. Verse 11. It's telling us about the fish in verses... it tells us about the swine in verse 7. Verse 4. Found it. I should have used my electronic concordance. I'm using a regular Bible instead of an electronic. When some of you got to it or either knew it, sit there, saying, all right, Steve, it's in verse 4. Are you going to find it? Yeah, I found it. Verse 4. Nevertheless, these shall, it tells us in the first three verses, you can eat. In verse 3, it says you can eat whatsoever parts the hoof and is cloven-footed, and choose the cud among the beasts. That shall you eat. But verse 4, nevertheless, these shall you not eat of them that chew the cud, or of them that divide the hoof. There's an exception, as the camel, because he chews the cud, but divides not the hoof. He is unclean to you. Friends, those of you in the Middle East need to take a look at verse 4 of Leviticus 11 there. You wouldn't be drinking that raw camel milk or eating the meat of a camel. He says these things, the experts suspect that raw camel milk and meat transmit the virus. The Saudi government has warned its citizens against consuming either. Well, God beat you to the punch, you guys. He told you don't drink that stuff. Don't eat that meat of a camel. Long ago, he put it in this book, the Holy Bible. Leviticus 11, verse 4. Back to the news article from last night. Michael T. Osterholm, director of the Center for Infectious Disease Research and Policy at the University of Minnesota, said cases might have surged in March because camels are born between November and March. Young camels are most susceptible to the virus and could spread it to their mothers who are still being milked then. The WHO, the World Health Organization, is investigating how long the virus can live on surfaces like bed sheets and hospital equipment. Health authorities advise any hospital with what is suspected to be a case of MERS to have all personnel wear masks, gowns, gloves, and face shields to prevent breathing in respiratory droplets or contact with body fluids. Cases have also been reported in Jordan, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Tunisia, and the United Arab Emirates. And there have been isolated cases in travelers returning to European countries. A little bit more in this article. Although the WHO has not issued travel warnings, Saudi Arabia suggested last year that older Muslims, young children, and people with chronic diseases put off their pilgrimages to Mecca. Let's skip ahead just a little bit. The worst recent outbreak of cases has been in a city of Saudi Arabia spelled Jidda. Jeddah, a second largest city which is the gateway for pilgrims arriving by ship or air, but also a commercial center in its own right. A WHO team is investigating cases there. Okay, friends, the main point of this is that this virus, it's had its first case come into the United States. That means the virus infection is here. It's mostly easily transmitted in hospitals with respirators or other machines that this article says aerosolize coughs. A version of this article that I just read to you, friends, appears in print today on May 3rd on page A10 of the New York edition with the headline entitled First U.S. Case of MERS, M-E-R-S virus, is found in Indiana man who visited Mid-East. All right, I know that was a long article, and friends, very important, significant article, because again, let me throw the chart back up here for just a moment. It relates to the fourth seal of Revelation, the pale horse, which has a characteristic that Jesus Christ described in plain language as loimus, which the Greek English lexicons defined as disease epidemics, the plagues of Egypt, pestilence. All right, now, friends, today's service, we provided that news update and then a short clip by Mr. Herbert Armstrong on Endtime Elijah. We have a cartoon next, part 1 of the original Elijah. We aired that last week on the live stream here on the 26th of April. That'll be in our archive. If you missed part 1, let's see. Do I have part 2 ready to go? Yeah, we have it right here. Let me just cue it up for us. Okay, let's play the animated cartoon that continues the story on the original Elijah, and then following that, I'll do a little portion of the evaluation by I think I can tell you his name because you're going to see it on the article if you look it up, by Jeff Nielsen. He wrote an article evaluating the scriptures that relate to Mr. Armstrong having been the end-time Elijah, and he goes further and relates those to the end-time Zerubbabel. And, you should find this article very interesting. He has a point he makes in there that will let you make your own conclusion here as to whether what Jeff provides from Scripture is correct or not, that God could, and resurrect Mr. Armstrong to do the end-time Zerubbabel job and maybe do more end-time Elijah work. We'll read that after we view this short part 2 of an animated little movie on the original Elijah. I hope you enjoy this. I'll be back with Jeff's article right after this.
After a long time, in the 3rd year, the word of the Lord came to Elijah.
Go and present yourself to Ahab, and I will send rain on the land.
So Elijah went to present himself to Ahab. Now the famine was severe in Samaria, and Ahab had summoned Obadiah, who was in charge of his palace. Obadiah was a devout believer in the Lord. While Jezebel was killing off the Lord's prophets, Obadiah had taken 100 prophets and hidden them in 2 caves, 50 in each, and had supplied them with food and water. Ahab had said to Obadiah,
Go through the land, to all the springs and valleys. Maybe we can find some grass to keep the horses and mules alive, so we will not have to kill any of our animals.
So they divided the land they were to cover, Ahab going in one direction and Obadiah in another. As Obadiah was walking along, Elijah met him. Obadiah recognized him, bowed down to the ground, and said,
Oh, is it really you, my Lord Elijah?
Yes.
He replied,
Go tell your master Elijah is here.
What have I done wrong
asked Obadiah.
that you are handing your servant over to Ahab to be put to death? As surely as the Lord your God lives, there is not a nation or kingdom where my master has not sent someone to look for you. And whenever a nation or kingdom claimed you were not there, he made them swear they could not find you. But now you tell me to go to my master and say, Elijah is here. I don't know where the Spirit of the Lord may carry you when I leave you. If I go and tell Ahab and he doesn't find you, he will kill me. Yet I, your servant, have worshipped the Lord since my youth. Haven't you heard, my Lord? What I did while Jezebel was killing the prophets of the Lord? I hid 100 of the Lord's prophets in 2 caves, 50 in each, and supplied them with food and water. And now you tell me to go to my master and say, Elijah is here? He will kill me.
Elijah said,
As the Lord Almighty lives, whom I serve, I will surely present myself to Ahab today.
So Obadiah went to meet Ahab and told him, and Ahab went to meet Elijah. When he saw Elijah, he said to him,
Is that you, you troubler of Israel?
I have not made trouble for Israel, but you and your father's family have. You have abandoned the Lord's commands and have followed the Baals. Now summon the people from all over Israel to meet me on Mount Carmel, and bring the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah who eat at Jezebel's table.
So Ahab sent word throughout all Israel and assembled the prophets on Mount Carmel. Elijah went before the people and said,
How long will you waver between 2 opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal is God, follow him.
But the people said nothing. Then Elijah said to them,
I am the only one of the Lord's prophets left, but Baal has 450 prophets. Get 2 bulls for us. Let Baal's prophets choose one for themselves, and let them cut it into pieces and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. I will prepare the other bull and put it on the wood, but not set fire to it. Then you call on the name of your God, and I will call on the name of the Lord. The God who answers by fire, he is God.
Then all the people said,
What you say is good.
Elijah said to the prophets of Baal,
Choose one of the bulls and prepare it first, since there are so many of you. Call on the name of your God, but do not light the fire.
So they took the bull given them and prepared it. Then they called on the name of Baal from morning till noon.
Baal, answer us.
They shouted, but there was no response. No one answered, and they danced around the altar they had made. At noon, Elijah began to taunt them.
Shout louder,
He said,
surely he is a god. Perhaps he's deep in thought or busy or traveling. Maybe he's sleeping and must be awakened.
So they shouted louder and slashed themselves with swords and spears, as was their custom, until their blood flowed. Midday passed, and they continued their frantic prophesying until the time for the evening sacrifice. But there was no response. No one answered. No one paid attention. Then Elijah said to all the people,
Come here to me.
They came to him, and he repaired the altar of the Lord which had been torn down. Elijah took 12 stones, one for each of the tribes descended from Jacob, to whom the word of the Lord had come, saying,
Your name shall be Israel.
With the stones he built an altar in the name of the Lord, and he dug a trench around it large enough to hold 2 seahs of seed. He arranged the wood, cut the bull into pieces, and laid it on the wood. Then he said to them,
Fill 4 large jars with water and pour it on the offering and on the wood. Do it again.
He said, and they did it again.
Do it a 3rd time.
He ordered, and they did it the 3rd time. The water ran down around the altar and even filled the trench. At the time of sacrifice, the prophet Elijah stepped forward and prayed,
Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, let it be known today that you are God in Israel, and that I am your servant, and have done all these things at your command. Answer me, Lord. Answer me, so these people will know that you, Lord, are God, and that you are turning their hearts back again.
Then the fire of the Lord fell and burned up the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, and the soil, and also licked up the water in the trench. When all the people saw this, they fell prostrate and cried,
The Lord, He is God.
The Lord, He is God.
Then Elijah commanded them.
Seize the prophets of Baal. Don't let anyone get away.
They seized them, and Elijah had them brought down to the Kishon Valley and slaughtered there. And Elijah said to Ahab,
Go, eat and drink, for there's the sound of a heavy rain.
So Ahab went off to eat and drink. But Elijah climbed to the top of Carmel, bent down to the ground, and put his face between his knees.
Go and look toward the sea.
He told his servant, and he went up and looked.
There is nothing there.
He said, 7 times Elijah said.
Go back.
The 7th time the servant reported.
A cloud as small as a man's hand is rising from the sea.
So Elijah said,
Go and tell Ahab, hitch up your chariot and go down before the rain stops you.
Meanwhile, the sky grew black with clouds. The wind rose. A heavy rain came on, and Ahab rode off to Jezreel. The power of the Lord came on Elijah, and tucking his cloak into his belt, he ran ahead of Ahab all the way to Jezreel.
Friends, okay, that was part 2. We'll do part 3 next week of this little animated movie, cartoon-like movie on the original Elijah. And friends, I'm going to have to ask your forbearance on the article by Jeff I wanted to read to you today on the Endtime Elijah. And, you know, there's no hurry on that, really, because we spent so much time covering that very important and significant news story that I got a hold of last night. It's actually being printed with a dateline of today in the New York news source it's being published in. I got an advance copy of it last night through my sources, and because of that important and significant story related to the 4th seal of Revelation on disease epidemics. Those of you who tuned in, if you're not catching this news story and how significant it is that we are now in, according to experts, health experts at the World Health Organization, we are now in the post-antibiotic era. That's what they're officially calling this time period medically, when they're suddenly finding out that antibiotics that used to work aren't working in half the people. And it's causing fatalities at an alarming rate. And as that gets worse, friends, it could be part of the fulfillment of the fourth seal. The fourth seal on this chart from the book of Revelation, as depicted in Revelation 6, a pale horse with a rider named Death, alongside whom the grave rides, Hades, hell, that Jesus Christ described in plain language in Matthew 24, Luke 13, and Mark 13 and Luke 21, In Matthew 24, he described it as loimos, which, again, the Greek English lexicons define as pestilence, disease epidemics, the plagues of Egypt. That's just part of the fourth seal, but that's a major part of it, because 1/3 of the people are going to die because of this seal, and that could well be mostly by disease epidemics. And they're on the way. They're on the way in this post-antibiotic era. You heard that. That term just broke in the news story that's being published today, friends, being released by the World Health Organization, that we're now in the post-antibiotic era. And those of you watching here, perhaps you heard that first right here. Friends, I'm going to hold up Jeff's article, though, because we spent so much time on the other article, and there's another reason why I'm holding it up. The slides that I converted to work, they were on my computer that crashed just before we signed on here, and I'm going to have to redo those slides again because somehow we lost them. I was just, while this was playing, I was saying, hey, why aren't they in? They were in the directory in which I put the other things we're showing you, including that movie. They're not there, and my computer crashed, and we lost, and I looked for them, and they're gone. So I got to redo those slides that I want to show while I go through Jeff's article. We'll do that next week. You can look forward to that. I will plan to do that. I'm going to put it that way. God says we should always say we'll do things God willing. So there may be a reason why God's wanting to hold this up a week. Maybe some people he wants to contact need to know to tune in for this. Maybe you can tell a few people we're going to have something very exciting next week related to the end time Elijah. I mean, this is so, what Jeff says is backed up by Scripture in such a way it's going to make some people sit back in a gasp. I said I'm with a friend of mine, one of our brothers in the church, Dan Listen, and another friend, Sam Smitherman, down in Tuscaloosa. We went to a restaurant one day, stayed there the whole day. I mean, the waiters were amazed. You guys were here 8 hours? We were there 8 hours, the whole day, going through this article and checking the Scriptures. And I'll tell you the conclusions we came up with after we read that together and pursued the Scriptures together. I'll tell you about that in our coming weeks ahead as we go through portion by portion that article. It's a long one. It's like 53 pages. So we'll take a little time with it. I'll put slides up on the screen showing you the Scriptures that relate to it as we go. What I think I'll do today, friends, I pulled a song that someone sent to me by email. I pulled it up off of YouTube, so it should be showable on YouTube. I hope they don't slice our audio out here at this point because of it, but it's got a message in this song. It's one by a friend of mine, an AC graduate from 1973. I thought he was in the class of 74, but then I saw something that said, hey, you're wrong. He graduated a year ahead of that in 1973 in Big Sandy. And Tom, who sometimes tunes in here, I won't say his last name unless Tom tells me it's okay to to say Williams on the air here. Tom, thank you, Tom. I appreciate you sending it to me. Tom sent me, hope you will continue to send me things after today. He sent me a link, or he actually sent me the video, or the audio. He sent me an audio clip of this song. I got the video downloaded now, by David Soul, called Don't Give Up on Us, Baby. Now, he sent it to me for a certain reason, spiritually related to something, but I like this song so much that it made me think of a prayer to God. Don't give up on us, God, even though we're scattered all over the place. And you needed a fulfillment of 1 Corinthians 11:19, where it mentions divisions must be among you so that those who are approved may be made manifest. And you can check me on that if you don't think I quoted it correctly. I didn't quite get to it before I said it. But that gives some understanding to what's happened to us in this time of scattering. In Acts chapter 8 of Acts and verse 4 mentions during the first era, the Ephesian era, how they were in a situation that caused God to inspire the writers to say that we're in the church of God scattered abroad. Let me find that for you real quick so I get that just right. It's either Acts 4 verse 8 or Acts 8 verse 4. Let's try Acts 8. I think it starts there. Verse 4, as for Saul, he made havoc of the church. All right, I want Acts 4 verse 8. Okay. Verse 8 of... all right, I've blown this. Let me see. Where's my electronic concordance? I don't have it, but I do have a... we have time since this is the Sabbath. I'm not in a rush to get a news program quickly concluded, but I do want to wrap up and give you time to do some personal study or whatever. I've got a Bible here that I can just punch in scattered abroad. See, A-B abroad, A-B-R-O-A-D. All right, when you're live on the air, sometimes your brain don't think as fast. And that's coming up in... Wait a minute, what happened? I must have spelled that wrong. How come my axe is not showing up here? Friends, here it is. It is Acts 8, verse 4. What happened to me? I don't know why I didn't see that when I opened up my Bible. Okay, let's bring that back. Flip back over to Acts 8, verse 4. Therefore, you know what? I must have turned to the wrong chapter and thought I was in chapter 8, I guess. I don't know. It even says it in verse 1. Let's start there in verse 1. Just go through 4 verses of Acts 8. And Saul was consenting unto the death of Stephen, and at that time there was a great persecution against the church, which was in Jerusalem, and they were all scattered abroad throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. And devout men carried Stephen to his burial and made great lamentation over him. Verse 3, as for Saul, he made... I picked up on verse 3 instead of 4. That's what I did. As for Saul, he made havoc of the church, entering into every house and hailing men and women, committed them to prison. Verse 4, therefore they that were scattered abroad went everywhere preaching the word. So a couple verses, verse 1 and verse 4, give a reference to the church of God, except for the apostles, being scattered abroad during the early Ephesian era. And here we are in the 6th era, the Philadelphia era, scattered abroad. Now, I just stepped on some of your toes, and some of you who send me nasty emails sometimes say, no, this is the Laodicean era. Well, you're contradicting Mr. Armstrong when you say that. He were to teach as we were taught. He died in the faith, having told us that the Philadelphia era will exist and carry on, and the Laodicean era will not officially start as an era. He didn't say anything about an attitude not being here. The attitude of Laodicea was here even while Mr. Armstrong was alive, and for many decades that Laodicean era was alive. Now, I'm sorry, that Laodicean attitude. I meant to say attitude. The Laodicean attitude was alive even while Mr. Armstrong was alive. And it's alive, as many of you well know, in attitude, and even dominant in many cases with what's going on during our scattered amount there. But Mr. Armstrong taught us, God taught us through Mr. Armstrong, that the Laodicean era as an era does not begin until Philadelphia is taken away to a place of nutrition, of nourishment, protection, final training, as we used to say it, safety. So that's the final word or doctrine on it from Mr. Herbert Armstrong. Attitude, Laodicean attitude is here, yes. Some who have made writings and mentioned, well, we're in the Laodicean era, and the context of the writings, you can say, hey, they're not really locked in on that point. They're really just, you could substitute attitude for that word era there, and that what they're saying would make sense, and then there wouldn't be a confrontation like a couple of goats or a couple of rams butting heads. Anyway, I want to keep that a small point for this. But this song by David Soul relates to what I was just mentioning about Acts 8, mentioning the time of the Church of God being scattered abroad. We are very much scattered, broadly scattered now. And brethren are here and brethren are there. You know, I'm not saying that there's not brethren in a group over here and right across the street, a Church of God XYZ version containing true brethren, some of whom are very Philadelphian in attitude, who are doing as Christ told us to do in Luke 21, verse 36. They're watching world events and praying, becoming an active part of the world events by praying and asking God to do this or do that over here where this is happening and that's happening, and God may be saying, hey, Johnny, Susie, Stephen, Larry, Jeff, Tom, I like what you just asked me. I'm going to do that because you asked me to do it. And friends, I can tell you about prayers I prayed. Some of them I had to sustain in for 3 years, that when I saw God answer them, it was like, I thought what I was asking you about was true. I wasn't sure, but I thought it was. And now that you've done this, I'm amazed, because I asked you for 3 years to please correct us about something, and God did. I've told some of you about that before. Let's close up, friends, today's service. Thank you for joining me, those of you who did. I wish you a really wonderful rest of the Sabbath and a great and wonderful week. Hope you'll join us for Nightcast, Sunday through Thursday night. If you can make it live, I love that, because if we have problems, it's wonderful to have your prayers right in the middle of a live broadcast. That's great to have. And otherwise, if you can't make it while we're live, we do put them in the archive and on Facebook for a little while longer. And you can watch it on demand anytime on demand at your leisure. Half hour of the day's current news. Wednesday night we went an hour because of that significant, important story on that disease epidemic becoming a World Health Organization worldwide concern, because of it now being, because they could foresee us going into the how do they put it? The post-antibiotic era. But friends, because we're scattered, and because I was thinking, I've been praying this, God, don't give up on us. When Jesus Christ gets ready to pull us to gather us, and those who are accounted worthy to escape be gathered and flown to a place that God prepares in the wilderness, in a triangulation area where Petra is, in that Jordan area over there, around Amman and so on. You can triangulate it. It's in the area where Petra is, and whether it's Petra or not, per se, when God does take us to that place he prepares in the wilderness, it could become very beautiful. All God's got to do is roll in a bunch of nice water, create a little river, things grow. It could be a beautiful place in the wilderness, a little oasis, beautiful, well, more beautiful than some of you are posting pictures that show up from your communities in Louisiana and other places. Just some beautiful pictures I've seen this week of little paradise-like places. God could make that place in the wilderness like that for us. So, even though you might be quasi living in a cave for a while, you may have this beautiful river out there and trees and things growing on trees and birds singing, and it could just be wonderful, wonderful time when we're taken away to a place of protection, final training. So God, don't give up on us. We're all scattered, and you don't give up on what God's doing. It may be frustrating sometimes, and Satan's really whamming us with depression and thoughts of giving up and thoughts of being frustrated, but hang in there. This song, the lyrics in this song are not perfect. That's why I'm delaying. I wanted to say, friends, the lyrics in this song are not perfect. Maybe some of you who are good at writing poetry or whatever, can change the words on this lyric. Send me an email this week, and I'll create a new version that we can karaoke sing along with and post the new lyrics up on the screen. This will have the original lyrics as David Soul popularized the song, and he'll be singing this song as we close today, this Sabbath service for May 3rd, 2014. Again, happy Sabbath. Thanks for joining us. To close it off, it's not a perfect song, but there are reasons we can relate to it. God, don't give up on us, and let's us not give up on the program that God has for us, even though things may get tough in the weeks and months ahead. Don't give up. God, don't give up on us. Happy Sabbath. Thanks for joining us, friends. If you stay with us for this song, that'll finish us up today. If you don't, if you sign off now, I understand you may not like this song, but we're going to work on changing the lyrics for it and try it again next week, so you might want to give a listen to it the way it is. Bye-bye, everyone. Happy Sabbath.
Don't give up on us, baby. Don't make the wrong seem right. The future isn't just one night. It's written in the moonlight, painted on the stars. We can't change ours. Don't give up on us, baby. We're still worth one more try. I know we put a last one by, just for a rainy evening, when maybe stars are few. Don't give up on us, I know we can still come through. I really lost my head last night. You've got a right to stop believing. There's still a little love left, even so. Don't give up on us, baby. Lord knows we've come this far. Can't we stay the way we are? The angel and the dreamer, who sometimes plays a fool. Don't give up on us, I know we can still come through. It's written in the moonlight, and painted on the stars. We can't change our one by, just for a rainy evening, when maybe stars are few. Don't give up on us, I know we can still come through.